Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. It's great to see you here today, and we're really looking forward to this webinar on creating a safe space to thrive, enhancing psychological safety through executive coaching. If you don't know me, I'm Jenny Garrett. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer. And together with my team, we deliver impactful development to support those from underrepresented groups to progress at work, as well as supporting all leaders to make inclusion happen. My latest and recently award-winning practical and empowering book is Equality versus Equity: Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace. I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Those of you who did donate, your donations will go towards increasing resilience, inspiring and raising aspirations in teens. And if anyone wants to know more about Rocking Your Teens, my colleague Tanya will add a link in the chat so you can find out more about us. It would be great to know who's here. So do feel free to say hi in the chat and let us know where in the world you're logging in from. We've often have people from all over the globe. So it's always good to know who's joining us today. And as I said, today we are talking about psychological safety. According to Dr. Amy Edmondson, the scholar and Harvard Business School professor who coined the term, it is a belief that you will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. We learn by asking questions. That's what human behavior is. So if we feel that we can't ask questions, then there's a real problem. And I know I've definitely worked in environments where perhaps we've felt there'll be blame if we ask the wrong question. Perhaps we've felt a bit like we'll be embarrassed or shamed if we say the wrong thing. And so we don't feel safe to bring our ideas, our questions, or our concerns. And as a result, our organizations, they suffer because they miss out on those things. So we're going to be talking about psychological safety today. And why is it important? Well, apparently improving psychological safety has the potential to result in a 27% reduction in turnover and a 40% reduction in safety incidents and a 12% increase in productivity. That was according to a Gallup poll. And I think those are all things that we really, really want. We want the best productivity. We want people to stay with us. We want to retain staff, and we want our workplaces to be safe and be places where we can thrive. So in today's webinar, our wonderful coaches that you can see on the screen, Janice, Marie, Obehi, Sobia, and Mark, all listed in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, a directory that connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority. We'll be discussing psychological safety and how we can enhance it through executive coaching. If you want to find out more about this amazing directory of people who I all vouch for, who are all accredited, who all have all the insurances, at least 3 years experience of coaching formally at the most senior levels in organizations, do go to diverseexecutivecoaches.co.uk, or you can find us on the LinkedIn group, or you can connect with them directly because you can see them on screen here. So the format of the session is that our wonderful coaches will introduce themselves. I will start off by asking a few questions, and then we'll go to your questions as the audience. But please don't wait to the end to put your questions in the chat, or your thoughts or your perspectives. We love interaction. So feel free to be putting any thoughts, any resources, any ideas you have in the chat, as well as your questions, which we will come to at the end. And you never know, you might get a little shout out as well. There is a hashtag for today's conversation, and that is coaching for psychological safety. It's a little bit long. Feel free to shorten it if you need to. So I'm going to go straight to the introductions. And Mark, I'd love you to introduce yourself first, please.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name's Mark Anderson. I'm a coach. I'm predominantly a career coach. So my work is quite varied. So I spend some time working one-to-one with adults who are a bit stuck in their career and they're not sure what to do next, and they're looking to do something different perhaps. So I do some one-to-one sessions with adults who are perhaps looking to change career. I also work with some other coaches running webinars for large organizations, helping their staff to develop and move on in their career. So that's quite a large part of the work that I do. And also I do work with some young people as well. So I do spend some time going into schools and colleges, helping young people as they start their career journeys as well. So it's quite nice being able to feedback the messages I get from adults to the young people that I work with about the mistakes that perhaps they've made in their career, so that they don't make the same mistakes. And then I also do a bit of work with the BBC as well, on the careers part of their website, contributing to podcasts and articles as well. So that's me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Marie.
Hi, thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marie Loney, an executive wellbeing coach. Got a background in fashion and business. And throughout my career, I had encountered high-pressured environments. I experienced overwhelming workloads and impossible deadlines. And that actually led to repeated exhaustion and burnout. And that might resonate with some of you. Well, I actually decided enough was enough and founded Glow Consultancy London. And at Glow, I support professional women and organizations develop wellbeing practices for a better work-life balance. Through executive coaching, facilitation, and training, I support individuals and organizations with some of the tools that can help maintain mental fitness, productivity, resilience, and stress management. I also tap into my creative side and use some of my drawing and collage techniques just to add that unique twist to my coaching practice. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Marie. And Obehi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Obehi Alafoje, and I'm a psychologist and executive coach, and I support senior HR and business leaders implement sustainable strategies when it comes to mental well-being and productivity in the workplace. I'm a co-founder of a culture change consultancy called Aurora, and we're dedicated to creating psychological safe spaces to empower employees to thrive. Executive coach, I tend to work with senior leaders, managing stress, team conflict, poor engagement, and to enhance overall high performance in the workplace. Also workshops and training and so on and so forth. So that is me.
Thanks so much, Obehi. Janice?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Janice Taylor. I'm a career and leadership development coach, and I'm based down in Brighton, not so sunny today. And I work predominantly with adults, individually or in groups, as they gain clarity around their career direction and the energy and focus they need to make the changes they want to make. So that's me, short and sweet.
Lovely. And last but definitely not least, Sabir.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. My name is Sobia Iqbal. I am a mentor, career and leadership coach, supervisor, speaker and writer. And I'm really passionate about developing the next generation of diverse talent. I found that often organizations find garnering, strategically utilizing and operationalizing these diverse perspectives difficult. And that's where I come in, supporting organizations with these complex challenges. And in my work regarding psychological safety, I think it's essential for both the effectiveness of coaching and the development of strong leadership. When leaders and teams feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to be open, honest, and courageous. This allows them to share ideas freely, ask tough questions, and engage in challenging conversations without fear of judgment or repercussion. And in turn, this leads to more powerful insights, growth, and innovation.
Wonderful, wonderful. As you can see, I've brought together such a wonderful group of coaches today with so much experience to share. I think we're very, very lucky to have this as our Christmas gift, actually. So, going to my first question, actually, before I do, I want to give a very quick shout out. Great to see you here, Minaz, a friend of ours you are, and it's really great that you've taken the time out to listen in and learn a bit about psychological safety. And also Vimbaneshi, and apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly, but really happy to have you here. So Maynaz from B&Q and Vimbanashi from the NHS. Really happy to have you both here joining us. And as I said, please do feel free to interact, share your thoughts in the chat. If you haven't said hello as yet in the chat, please feel free to do so as well. So going to our first question, I mentioned a little bit of research which highlighted a strong correlation between highly rated leadership skills and psychological safety. From your experience coaching executives, what specific leadership behaviors or mindsets have the biggest impact on creating a psychologically safe environment? Yeah, so and I'll just share the study again. So in 2022, a study by Ecsell Institute found that when a leader's skills were rated a 9 or a 10 by employees, they had an average psychological safety score of 84%. On the other hand, those whose overall skills were rated a 6 or lower had an average psychological safety rating of 36%. So it shows a real correlation between psych safety and leadership there. So from your experience coaching executives, what specific leadership behaviors or mindsets have the biggest impact on creating a psychological safe environment? And I'll start with you, Marie.
Okay, so developing active listening skills, that's one of the behaviors that I've experienced in clients. It's a very powerful tool. So when teams feel truly heard and understood, they are more likely to share their ideas, they're more likely to voice concerns, and they actually take risks without feeling fear or judgment. So active listening skills go actually beyond just hearing the words. It involves engaging fully with the speaker. So that's showing some empathy and also responding in a way that validates their perspective. So the way I've seen this play out is when leaders are engaging in these skills, they use body language. So that this sort of demonstrates that they're focused and they're actually present. So they're fully engaged, they've got undivided attention, no distractions, and that actually signals full engagement in the conversation. Eye contact is another body language that can be used as well. And this also facilitates that stronger connection and trust. In NLP, so there's a technique called mirroring, and that can help us also build rapport and trust. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It explores the interplay between neurology, language, and behavior. And it was created in the 1970s by Richard Bandler and John Grinder. So mirroring is often used to communicate and build rapport and establish trust, as I said before. And the technique is actually quite subtle. So it's a subtle way of using your body language through posture, or it might be through some sort of gesture. And if you actually delay it slightly, so for instance, somebody might, touch the side of their face and then you delay that slightly, it's a subconscious connection that's happening there. So adopting these techniques into leadership styles can create an environment where psychological safety actually flourishes and empowers teams to achieve their best.
I love that. And those are really practical, small things that you can do quite easily, that you can embed in your leadership practice that can make a big difference. So Bia, what are your thoughts?
So I think the leadership behaviors and mindsets that have the most significant impact on creating psychological safety are those that encourage self-awareness, so know thyself, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and a deep commitment to shared accountability. And I think these are all qualities that not only help the leader to create the conditions for safety, but also to model those behaviors for the rest of the team. So I'm very much about walking your talk, leading by example. And it's less about what you say and more about what you do. So I have seen how this can result in spaces where open communication flows freely, trust is built over time, and individuals feel empowered to challenge limiting beliefs, engage in tough conversations, and explore new ideas, as well as fostering openness to learning from feedback or mistakes, as well as feeling comfortable with calculated risk taking, which is crucial for innovation. So all of which makes this essential for leadership development and team growth. And ultimately, psychological safety, safe environments foster growth, adaptability, and confidence. So unlocking the potential of individuals and organizations.
Thank you. Very compelling argument for it, actually. Thank you. And Janice?
Yeah, just to sort of build on what's already been said, one of the big things for me is just to consider how approachable you are as a leader. Are you open to having some real conversations with your team and those people around you? But also having the mindset that there isn't anyone that you can't learn from, actually. Every conversation is a potential learning opportunity. And I know that from going back to a story from many years ago, when someone from my team, quite a junior member of staff, shared with me, actually, of Janice, when we have a problem, we're a bit scared to approach you. You know, we don't, you don't say anything to us and we don't know what's going on, so we're wary of approaching you. And that was a really amazing piece of feedback. I admire her courage for speaking up, actually, and feeling that she could tell me that. But it's a piece of feedback I've never forgotten, actually, and I often come back to that example. Actually, just be aware how approachable you are, because how you might be coming across might not be how the other members of the team are seeing you. So yeah.
That's such a good idea, asking for that feedback. And there can be an absence of it when you are a leader. People don't always want to give it to you, but finding those places where someone will be honest and open with you, creating the space where you can be approachable enough makes a huge difference, or else we never know. So thank you so much. And Mark?
Yeah, I think similar to what's already been said, really. I think it's really about providing that platform for the team to speak out or express their concerns. And so from the practical point of view, it's doing things like continually verbalizing that point when you're with your team in meetings, by saying things like, if you've got any questions, if you've got any concerns, please do let me know. And maybe even having a specific time during the week where you have this open door, where if you've got any concerns or queries or questions, that's the time you can approach your leader. So that would really help. And that also provides a ripple effect as well, because if the whole team know that policy, when new people come into the team, then the people who are already in that team will say to the new person, do speak to our manager about this. They're very approachable. You can always express your concerns. So it does create that ripple effect. And I think, as has already been said, it's really about leading by example, displaying those qualities that you want to see in your team, displaying humility, that vulnerability where you're not thinking that you know everything and they know nothing, but it's being able to ask questions yourself, show your curiosity, having that growth mindset. So if there's an issue, you can present it to the team and say, well, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? And then that subconsciously gives other people permission to do the same when they have their own queries.
Yeah, I think the point you're making, all of you, in different ways, is so important. If you have a line manager who says work-life balance is so important, but they're sending emails at 9 o'clock at night, they never have a lunch break, you follow what they're doing, not what they're saying. If you have a line manager who doesn't respond to emails after 6, who goes out for a walk at lunchtime, it gives you permission to do the same. And it's so important to do that. I did some work with an organization recently where they realized that line managers were never taking their full amount of holiday, but they were telling everyone to take their holidays. Well, if you don't take holidays, well, maybe I'm not permitted to take holidays. So they were really encouraging the line managers, the leaders, to take holiday, because they knew it would have a knock-on effect with the rest of the team. And the same with this idea around psychological safety. So some wonderful points here. Want to say hello to Dina and Jay and Martin and Shabnam and Amy. You're all really welcome, and Oge as well. Great to have you here, and I can see you sharing some of your reflections as well as introducing yourself here. Oh, hi, Lorna, as well. Great to see you. Although you might be having a few technical challenges, it looks like. Might be the internet connection, I think. So on to question 2. And as I've said, for those who may have just joined us, please do feel free to post your questions in the chat at any time. We're really happy to see them, and we will do our very best to work through as many of them as possible after the couple more questions that I would like to ask. So many leaders struggle with balancing the need to provide direction and maintain control with fostering a space where employees feel comfortable speaking up and challenging the status quo. I think it's a really difficult one, isn't it? That idea of, oh gosh, if I leave people to their own devices, what will they do? I think we can think about that with hybrid working as well. This idea, do we let people work from home? Are they actually working, or are they just doing their washing and watching TV, as some people think? So that idea of how do I have control or let go of control in order for others to speak up and challenge. So how do you help leaders navigate this tension through coaching? I'm going to start with you, Sabia.
So this is a common challenge for many leaders, so you're not alone if this is a growing edge for you. So I think, having said that, I think it's really important to navigate this dynamic in order to create a psychologically safe workplace. And I think it requires a deep understanding of yourself, as well as a commitment to growth, and growth mindset was mentioned earlier. For me, this begins with fostering self-awareness through reflecting on your personality, gaining feedback, including 360 feedback, understanding your preferred leadership style, and then exploring how effective that style currently is, that approach is. And psychometrics can be useful to explore strengths, areas of growth, and blind spots. I'm a big fan of action learning and iterating, so whereby leaders can find what authentically works for them by experimenting to find a balanced approach.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, good point. I think that sort of experimentation is lovely. I think when we wait to have the perfect solution, we'll be waiting forever, won't we? So giving ourselves permission to experiment is such a great idea. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to help the leaders to understand why it's important to create such an open environment, because once you're clear about the reason why, then you're going to be more motivated to want to achieve that. And also to think about what happens when that scenario isn't created. What impact will that have on the team and productivity? And I think also, when you want to create an environment that may not be there presently, it's important to think about when that ideal scenario was previously experienced. So when you can get them to reflect back on when they were part of a team and they were experiencing that openness in the workplace. So in coaching, I would ask a leader to reflect on times when they were in a working environment in a team, when they felt they could speak up without fear or judgment. What were the conditions that made that possible? What did the leader do to make that happen? And maybe if they couldn't think of examples, maybe get them to reflect on why that may have been the case. What was missing? What would they have done, or would they have wanted their leader to do at the time? So sometimes looking back to what happened in the past can help you to look forward and create situations where you want to ideally have that scenario where people have that open environment.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of solution-focused coaching. And they always say, when did the solution already occur? And that's what you're speaking to. The solution has occurred somewhere, even if it's in a tiny way. How can we amplify that? And I think that's such a great tip for everyone. Thank you so much, Mark. Obehi.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, this is such an interesting conversation here, because I have to think about one of the main reasons some leaders struggle with encouraging open dialogue, open conversation, even though they agree with it and go, yeah, we should have an open team. But I think they worry about the level of tension and disagreement that might bring up. And people aren't necessarily equipped to deal with tension. and not necessarily equipped with dealing with when people disagree or, dare I say, team conflict in that context. So I think that's one thing to think about. So even if they don't want to, there is a level of, well, do I have the skills to, if I leave it open and allow people to share what they want to say and speak up, can I manage it when if it gets out of control? Because the issue that it might get out of control again, I wouldn't have to do it, and obviously HR is involved. So there's all that. So what I want to say here is tension and disagreement in the workplace it's not always negative. Like you need the tension and disagreement that tells you that two people are not the same. They have different point of view. They have different experience. They have different focus. So it allows us to think, oh, it's a melting pot. What's happening here? How can we understand each other? How can we compromise? So it's a powerful catalyst for growth. So you need the pain to grow. I don't think in any other place that wouldn't happen. So trying to restrict it in a team means that people aren't as innovative because it's not coming out. Because that's the first thing I wanted to say. So therefore, it's about a leader trying to explore opportunity in a safe space, really, for teams to explore their diverse perspective and thought process, being encouraged to challenge status quo or how we do things here, right? That allows them to come up with a more rounded solution. So this might take time, and I think some people you can't rush this, can't rush growth, so it has to take its time. So I want to be when I work with coaches on this, on leaders on this, what I'm coaching is for them to feel the discomfort of it. Because once they can feel it in the room, they're safe. Then they go, okay, so now you're feeling it. How would you push past? And sometimes it might just be being vulnerable to say, listen, I don't really know where this is all going to go, but I do want to know your point of difference here. I am anxious about where it might go. So being able to admit it allows other people or your team to be able to go, oh, yeah, me too, actually. But if you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable, then we can support each other to do that. So encouraging the open dialogue allows people to feel safer because that's the thing. I can see your vulnerability, you can see mine, and so on. So you might think about practical things like, well, how do you do it then? And it might be asking for regular feedback. So if a leader asks for regular feedback, then they get used to taking I can see where this source of discontentment might come from, for example, and then encouraging that regularly. So you hear from different team members. And that's how leaders start to spot there's an issue brewing over there, is by asking for those feedback. The other thing I wanted to share as well around sharing vulnerability is being able to say, look at what's happening with our team, look at what's happening for me. What do you think? What's your perspective on it? And being able to encourage other people to speak differently by saying something like, does anyone else see this differently? Like, ask the question. If you don't ask, they will say, does anyone see this differently? I want to hear counter arguments, knowing that it's safe. Nobody's going to start landing blows and swearing at people. We're going to keep it clean. But the idea is for it to come up, we all see it, melting soup, and then we come back into an agreement. But that's what I want to say. It's about encouraging leaders really at this point to take more bold steps, but to be vulnerable about the fact that I don't know everything. So I hope that makes sense there.
It makes absolute sense. And I think it's probably one of the most challenging things to do, to be in that space of vulnerability and say, oh, we don't agree with each other. I'm not going to use my power to make you agree with me. I'm going to actually listen and hear both of our perspectives, and I'm open to changing mine. I think it requires a good degree of knowledge about yourself and confidence. There's that willingness not to be in that position of power. But I think it's so important. And I think if you want to create psychologically safe environments, it's something that you really need to do. Janice, your last word on this question. What do you think?
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to add, really. Just maybe to get people to consider the long-term capacity building aspects of taking that sort of more coaching approach and creating a psychologically safe space. So, because it's easier in some ways to be more direct and just tell people what to do. And is that old saying, you can teach a man how to fish, or or just give them a fish. So I think if you can take the view that it's about building capacity in the people around you, and that's going to take time, and that's going to take a certain amount of vulnerability, as Obahi was saying, actually. And I think you could also, as a leader, if you're working with a coach, you could explore some of this within the coaching relationship. Could you use some of that? How vulnerable can you be with your coach, actually? How do you want that coach to coach you? Do you want someone to sort of say, I'm not going to give you the answer here. What's your thinking around this? So you could practice some of these behaviors in a coaching relationship. And I think if you're able to do that, then you can take it outside the coaching room and move forward on that basis.
Brilliant. Some great insights. Before we move on to question 3, just noticing some comments in the chat. Welcome, Manoir. Great to see you here. Saying that actually, agreeing on the comments and also suggesting emotional intelligence training for leaders, which I think is a great addition. Jay just sharing an experience where she was given the opportunity to come in at a different time to other colleagues, but then the boss worrying how it might look amongst peers and that they might look soft. This idea of equity, really, isn't it? The idea that actually we don't have to treat everyone the same. Everyone needs to be treated differently, but managers not being able to stand strong in that position and worry about how other people might react as well. And Amici making a point here that it's you've got to create the safe space within yourself and then be able to start constructing it with others, which is a lovely point, Amici, and Maynaz really agrees with you. Lots of other comments coming through. Your thoughts, your reflections, your experience is really resonating with the audience here. So thank you so much. So my final question before we go to questions from the audience, so do start posting your questions. We really want to see them, is can you share an example of a successful coaching intervention where you helped a leader significantly improve psychological safety within their teams? What were the key steps involved and what were the measurable outcomes? And I'll start with you, Obehi.
Thank you, because I did have some time thinking about what was the learning on this one, but I did have a example, a law firm that we were working with, and it was a team of senior partners, and so they've never necessarily had leadership training before. Really, they've kind of just learned what the previous partners or leaders have done, kind of thing. So this was their first proper entry into it. And they had an EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program. So if you have mental health issues, you can access it. They had brilliant ones. But of course, people weren't really using them. And yet for the law, there's a high, from the staff, there was a high level of lawyers saying that they were stressed, burnout, and anxieties and stuff like that. So it was a concern for this law firm. So for us to have the sort of as part of a larger program, so it was more classroom style. Then you have the group coaching in between the classroom. Went on for about 6 months or so. So the what I'm going to talk about is just going to be the classroom one, and then what happens in actual coaching. And the idea is that the leaders felt compelled to feel like they're these strong people, not in getting through these bullets, bulletproof persona. And so the idea that they were vulnerable too, I don't think they accepted that from each other. So being able to have this conversation, again, like what I said in the previous point, how vulnerable can you get? And that understanding that you're being able to be an inclusive leader, to encourage your team to be independent of you, to encourage them to work the best, need you as a leader. They need to see you at some level of vulnerability, that you are not fallible, and that you are able to collaborate with them for the best result. That was the first thing they needed to understand. And for that to happen, we needed to talk about, well, what was the last time, or where was the last time that you had trouble expressing yourself, or where you weren't coping very well? So they have to now start sharing a time recently where they weren't. And it was amazing to watch them all going, I didn't know that was happening for you. Like, no, because I couldn't even show, even amongst themselves, that they were vulnerable. But to hear it allowed them to support each other. And there was one particular leader who struggled so much, it was a bit obvious that she had. But there was something that said, when I was struggling and I had to go off sick, I didn't get flowers, I didn't get cards, in the way that a couple of other people who'd been in hospital for something else somehow got it. That was her showing how hurt she felt. And for the others to realize they didn't know what to do. That's why she didn't get flowers. Not that they didn't care, they didn't know how to operate in this way. So one of the key things, once they're open, then I go, all these EAPs that you have, we have great healthcare, we have great this stuff that you get your employees and other lawyers to buy into, but they're not using. How are we going to get them to use it? And so one of the exercises that they have to do, that was the coaching homework, which is to go and call that EAP number. And all of you on the call, you probably know this EAP number that they shove at you. Go and call that. Nobody ever bothers to call them. Go and call that number. You can have two options. You can decide to be yourself and say, hey, I'm a leader in this team and I'm struggling with anxiety. How can you help me? You can do that if you want. But the other thing is to say, hey, I'm a leader of this team. We pay for your services. What exactly do you offer my people? How often, how long are the sessions? How many sessions do they get? How long did it take you to pick up the phone? This is how they got to experience. If you can't even do this exercise, and how do you expect to let your colleague who's struggling to go and call some random 0800 number? So this was about taking steps. It was about taking action. It was about modeling the vulnerability. So that in the call, when they say, hey, I think you should call this number, it's going to take about 15 minutes before they pick up the phone, so bear that in mind. But they help with this, this, and this. I've used it myself personally. Or you can say, I called them myself to find out what they do, and this is what they told me. Shall we try? That way, you as a leader can go, right, I'm going to go get a cup of tea. Do you want one? I'm going to leave you to make this call. That way, this person feels empowered to make decisions for themselves, because I don't expect leaders to handle other people's mental health. That's not their job. What your job is to encourage them so that it doesn't get so bad they now have to be off sick, or it just prolongs itself. So that was the purpose of doing that, but it also added value around communicating, right? You cannot tell people just do this and they'll do it. That's not how that works. You have to lead by example. You have to convince them to do that, and you have to say it over and over again. So that is the example I'm going to use. And of course, this law firm means that they're all open with each other as leadership, but then it started to make its way down into their direct report, because all of a sudden my manager asking me how I am. It took a while for them to believe them that they really cared, but that was the point. And so you have to lead by examples, and that's the thing about leaders, and your vulnerability helps you do that immensely. I can't say it enough.
Fantastic.
So that is me. I hope that makes sense too.
Yeah, beautifully made point. Thank you very much, Obehi. And Marie, your example.
Yeah, so around this time of the year last year, I worked with a group, a team, quite a large team, and we asked them to do an exercise to just notice and become more aware of how everyone interacted and performed together. So we gave them 30 minutes and they had to create a giraffe. And they had to create this giraffe. There was some materials in the room, but not a lot. And so we just said, go just do this, 30 minutes, do this. And we had quite a few questions, can we use this? Can we use that? What do you mean? And we just let it sit with them. And so they started to think about how to make a giraffe in 30 minutes. And there were some subgroups were talking amongst themselves, mostly people that seemed familiar with each other, talking amongst themselves, brainstorming and trying to come up with some ideas. And then a couple of people kind of went away and started to look at maybe some materials or things that were in the room that they could use. And what happened was there was a leader, not the most senior leader in the room, started to say, okay, let's get this together. We don't have a long time. Let's pull this together. So it was very interesting to see how some of the group, the majority of the group, came along aligned with this leader because he was giving structure and direction. And they started to create this giraffe with their bodies. one member of the team went off and had a little book and started doodling in their book and seemed quite happy and sitting apart from the main core group. And then about three other people walked over to a flip chart and started to create their version of a giraffe, which was quite interesting. So towards the end of it, everyone seemed quite happy with what they had produced. And we then said to everyone, okay, how did you all feel in terms of how this went? Because we looked at the leader, there was one person that stood up and they took control, if you like. And how did that make you feel? Did everyone feel included? And if you didn't feel included, if you just went along with it because everybody else went along with it, and we found that some people said, well, yeah, because I didn't know really what I was doing. There's a bit uncertainty and ambiguity, and I needed somebody to give me some direction. And it's like, well, how can we work with that going forward in terms of how can we value everyone's voice in the room? How can we ensure that everyone feels included? So specifically the people who went and worked alone in certain areas of the room, how can we recognize that and help them to feel included? And how can we bring them in the fold to not disengage, but collaborate so that we can innovate together? So what came out of that was really everyone just kind of noticing that, one, how they communicate with each other, two, how they can include each other, even those people who maybe want to go off and do other things. What sort of conversations can we have with them so that they become a part of the group? Is that about valuing the conversations that we have with them? And how do we actually do that?
Fantastic. Thank you. Such a great example, really thorough examples from both of you. I wanted to ask Janice, did you have anything that you wanted to share on this question as well? This idea of sort of measurable outcomes.
Well, this is quite an old example going back a few years, but I remember working with someone who was constantly losing their temper actually, and was in danger of losing their job actually, because they wanted that promotion, but the stress and strain, so that it was quite a toxic relationship. So I started working with them as a coach, and I used Myers-Briggs actually, and that was a really helpful intervention at that time, because it was almost like just holding up a mirror to that. And I remember to this day this person saying, oh, so they're not just trying to wind me up. He really was seeing that the whole world was against him, and actually having this tool, this mirror held up, he was able to understand the behaviors of others, and as importantly the behaviors of himself a bit more. So consequently he then went on to get his promotion. But yes, I think that I think we've talked about being self-aware and having self-knowledge, but having that opportunity perhaps within a coaching context to have a mirror, to hold up a mirror and just to have a look through and see, okay, what's going on here? How approachable am I? Can people come and share things with me? I think it's such a helpful thing.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know it feels like everyone should know what Myers-Briggs is, but just
sorry.
in case you don't, would you be able to explain that?
Yes, it's a sort of a tool that looks at how extroverted, introverted we are, in terms of how we take in our energy, and also it looks at whether we prefer to take in information through our senses or whether we're a bit more dreamy, if you like. I'm trying to remember what the other one was actually.
It's whether we are perceived, so whether we're methodical or
whether we just tend to see the big picture as well actually. So it's quite a helpful tool actually, but perhaps it's not maybe used as much today, but yeah.
Yes, definitely helps you understand your personality preferences, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And adapt and flex your approach to meet others. So
and you can kind of look at others and what they're doing as well actually, although you can't predict what someone's doing, but it is helpful.
Actually, I wanted to add to that because I know not a lot of people aren't using it necessarily, but 16personalities.com is a free tool, and it has combined the Myers-Briggs, which is there, and with what psychologists tend to use called the Big Five, and it's combined it, so it's a bit more accurate. So I'd encourage people to go and take a test, it's free. And you, like I said, it's self-awareness about how you interact and how you interact with other people. But I think one of the key things for me is the idea that I am not like everyone else. Therefore, the things I'm good at, I'm leaning into that. The things I'm not good at, someone else is good at that. Let's go and find that person to do. So you're not trying to beat somebody else at the thing that they're being born to do. If that makes sense. And but it allows you to focus on the bit that is about you and how what makes you a great leader, what makes you special, and lean into that and develop that, as opposed to trying to develop something like, I don't know, note taking. That's not you. That's not you. End of story. But someone else can just do it like that. Yeah.
And I think that could help with managing stress, actually, just
Totally.
recognizing, yeah, where you're more likely to get stressed, where
Yeah.
someone else won't be. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a win-win
definitely.
potentially, I think.
Definitely. Yeah.
Lovely. We'll go to Maynaz's question shortly, but I just wondered if you had any thoughts you wanted to add, Sobia, just to in terms of these examples. I can't hear you. Doesn't look like you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Sorry, I think I was
Okay.
muted. Just in terms of just bringing in the systemic picture, because sometimes it can be psychological safety can be a cultural issue within the organization. So I think it's imperative working with boards and exec teams to work through those challenges. Again, going back to that earlier point of walking our talk and being in integrity, because people look to the leaders of the organization to determine the culture, the behaviors, the norms, the values, the lived values. So just wanted to bring in that systemic piece and cultural piece.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we want to go to Maynaz's question. And I think I'll start with you, Mark, in terms of, because we haven't heard your voice for a little while, in terms of answering this question. Any thoughts for Maynaz? Maynaz will be leading a Lean In Circle session in the company for supporting other women in leadership positions next year. Can you suggest anything else that could make an impact for a session or a workshop? And I guess we're thinking with the lens of psychological safety.
Yeah, I think something around the whole area of personal branding can be useful, because, you know, when it comes to being in the workplace, we all have a brand, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. We all have people perceive us in different ways, and sometimes how we want to be perceived might not be how people perceive us. So I think some kind of exercise around how you want to be seen as a leader can be really useful. Especially when you're trying to enhance psychological safety in the workplace. So, you know, something that can help individuals to think about how they want to be seen, whether it's face-to-face, it could even be online, you know, in meetings like this. So I think raising people's awareness of their own personal brand can be a really useful and insightful exercise to do.
Great. What would others add?
I'm a big proponent of taking a co-creative approach. So that can be as simple as a pre-session survey, asking people about, you know, their challenges or what they'd like to see in the workshop. And then during the workshop, you can discuss, like, you know, celebrate successes in terms of how people have leaned in. So that can be really inspiring and provide peer support. But what are the challenges and barriers in terms of leaning in, and how might we overcome them? So that can form quite an interesting co-created conversation.
Yeah, I like that too. And I've mentioned the 16 personalities. I think that's an easy win because it's free and depends on how many people in the circle, of course. But it allows people to do pre-work before coming, get the result, read it, and come and talk about it. And then think, what are my strengths actually and what am I struggling with? And see the differences in the room. So that's already fascinating because it already tells you how you might apply that into your teams outside of that leaning circle. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Anything else? I definitely would add something around just creating your ground rules together. You're working in the same organization, making sure, you know, what's said in the room, it stays in the room. People need to feel safe, that they can be open and share their own vulnerabilities, particularly if women leaders are a minority. So I think how you'll manage your relationships with each other how you'll manage what's being said, how you'll manage disagreement, all of that sort of thing. How do you want to be? Do you want to experiment in that space? Do you want to be playful? Where you're taking what's being said or what you're agreeing, the purpose, all of those things. I would spend a considerable amount of time, maybe even a first whole session, creating that safety among each other and getting to know each other before you get deeply into the work that you're going to do. I think it's worth investing in that, and I think then you'll have that psychological safety that you can take elsewhere into the organization as well.
So I was just briefly going to say, Jenny, just to follow on from what you said, it's about creating trust and establishing trust within the group. So once that's actually established, and that could be a series of exercises that you do, not unlike some of the ones that you've actually discussed as well, then you can start to communicate on a certain level. And I think that's really important, to establish trust.
Perfect, thank you. So we have another question here. It says, is there anything we can do as employees to foster psychologically safe, healthy environments? Any advice for potentially bottom-up approach?
I love this question, actually. That's a really good point. We talk about leaders all the time because we think you need to lead for the front, which is true. But if you're not a leader, what can you do? I want to say start with yourself. I think that's a really good point. What level of how comfortable am I in speaking my truth, saying what's going on for me? How comfortable am I sharing ideas that I have that is not fully formulated? How comfortable? You just need to get the comfortability and then decide to take one extra step, which is in this meeting today, I'm going to share my thoughts with people. What are the ideas that I have? Just one idea, and then see how it's perceived. And there's no reason why you can't say, by the way, I'm testing how safe I feel in this space. So I'm going to say something very vulnerable. And here, this is just idea I have, and I don't know what you think, and I'd like to get your feedback. Sometimes just saying that allows other people to go, okay, I'll try that too. Who wants to go next? So I think that's one way you could do as an employee for yourself, to speak up on it in a team if you feel to some level of comfortability. I don't want you to do anything you don't want to do, but you're going to have to just take a little bit of a risk. That's what I'll say.
I think that's right. I think, but I think you can almost test it out on one or two colleagues first. Maybe just expressing those concerns and questions with one or two people, see what kind of response you're getting, and then that can hopefully give you the confidence to bring that to perhaps a wider meeting, and grow in that way. So I mean, it can be hit and miss depending on the kind of colleague you're speaking to, but I think that's a good way perhaps to test it out.
I just wanted to add that if you're working in a challenging team environment where you do not feel psychologically safe to do so, it can be incredibly helpful to build like diverse relational networks, or even just through coaching or mentoring, or if you're a part of an employee resource group, or finding people and places where you do feel psychologically safe, where you can test the behaviors and build confidence, so that then you can start introducing it in more your day-to-day work.
I was just going to add about the conversation we're literally having right now, to communicate that within your workplace, to say that, hey, I actually was on this webinar today, and we were talking about psychological safety. Do you know what that is? Do you want to hear a bit more about it? And then to start the dialogue, start the conversation with your colleagues, your managers, when and if they are open to it. But here you have a resource where you can actually show people.
We started off, thank you all so much. We started off by talking about the work of Amy Edmondson, and I would definitely look her up as well. And there is a questionnaire that you can use. So you could, as a team, anonymously complete a questionnaire about how psychologically safe you feel. And then you could just talk about that, what's getting in the way, if that felt like something that you could do. The other way you could go is just explain. I think in conversations, sometimes in organizations, they say things like, I don't know why people aren't doing something. I don't know why we're not able to move this forward. And even just planting the seed of the idea. I wonder if people feel psychologically safe enough to share their ideas here. I wonder if we are allowed to make mistakes here. So not putting yourself out there personally, but sharing it as a wider thought could be quite a nice idea, particularly when things aren't moving in the way the organization wants to. Just, sharing the concept and saying perhaps that could be a barrier for us, and so that they can investigate it further. But also the questionnaire is a really nice one if you've got a team of people who you just want to, who are open to and willing to explore the idea of psychological safety, just sort of filling out a few questions and thinking, oh, actually I thought I was psychologically safe, but I am afraid to make mistakes, or I'm always covering my back in case I get blamed, or whatever it is. It just starts to highlight things that people might not have known. I think the example that Janice gave about getting some feedback and being unaware of it is really helpful, because I think sometimes we think organizations and individuals, because all organizations is individuals, know completely what they're doing, but they might not realize that the fact that every time you take a piece of work to them, that that you cross it through and rewrite it, or write red marks or get angry, that is making them not feel so safe. And when you get that feedback, then you can do something about it. But if you never get that feedback, they might not know, and they might not know how it's impacting you. So these are all ways, I think, that every level we can do something. And it is about enlightening people rather than assuming that they're going out of their way to make you feel uncomfortable in the workplace. I know Jay shared a couple of examples, I think, which are really great and seem to be helpful for those in the chat. But looking at the time, we're sort of running out, I think, just a couple of minutes. So I really want to bring this session to a close. I think it's been hugely valuable in really helping people see the value of creating psychological safety, but also sharing those practical examples of how coaches can really help you do it. And I think as a leader, particularly, it might not be something that you feel comfortable just sharing with everyone. And you might need to start this conversation in a coaching relationship in order to do the work on yourself to then take it outwards. So as I've said, I'd highly recommend the amazing coaches who you've just heard from. They've all shared their perspectives in different ways. And I hope that the way they've shared has really resonated with you. So do get in touch with them, either through the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. As I've said, it's a directory that connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority backgrounds, or you can link in with them, or find our group. We have a LinkedIn group called the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. So this was our last webinar for the year. Our next event will be in February. If you haven't subscribed to us on Eventbrite, please do so, and we'll be sharing our events for 2025. But the next one will be in February, and we really hope to see you there. We also have a survey. If you've got time, it takes about a minute to complete. Do complete the survey. We're always looking for new ideas for what you'd like future webinars to cover. And we also want to know what we do well and what we can do better. So my last thing to say is a huge thank you to Mark, to Sabia, to Marie, to Janice, and to Obehi. And of course yourselves for attending, for interacting, for sharing your wisdom. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, everyone. Do take care. Bye.